Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Caverns of Story podcast, where we take a look at small, minor characters and we tell big stories. My name is Toby Green, and I'm your host. Stick around. Thanks for joining me again. My name is Toby Green, the host of the Caverns of Story podcast. It is truly tremendous for you to be joining me in this podcast. This should be a pretty good one. I'm pretty excited about it. This podcast is episode number 2. Boy, once you get to 3, man. Boy, this is a real deal. The name of this podcast is King Agnarr and Queen Iduna: The Odyssey of Trust. So just a quick brief disclaimer, and I'll probably continue these disclaimers pretty much as long as it needs until it catches on. This podcast is basically about taking the minor characters or the smaller characters who might not have gotten a true backstory and fleshing them out a little bit. For example, if you were looking at Arthurian legends and you're looking at King Arthur, that spawned over 500 years or so. That was such a rich story because it spawned. You had Arthur as the main story, of course, the one that kicks it off. But all the Arthur's Knights of the Round Table end up getting their own side stories, which fleshes a story out. Even Merlin, who is nothing really more than a mentor character who really does help. He helps Arthur win. Even Merlin gets a full hero's journey type story. So that's the basic gist of the podcast, and we call it a cavern of story because if you're going into a cavern, it's big, it's expansive, and my attitude is we've just stumbled into a big cavern of stories that could be told. Now, here's the beautiful thing about the time that we are in media-wise. We have been doing, within major media, we have been doing in Hollywood almost upwards to Hollywood's been doing movies and stories on some level for a good, about 100 years almost, give or take, when you look at the black and white era films. So this podcast is basically acknowledging that within media and within the time frame that we are looking at, you have got stories upon stories upon stories that we're finding in this mythological cavern that we've entered. It doesn't mean that when I tell this story or the stories that I tell on this podcast that these are the definitive stories or that you can that these stories somehow invalidate any other story. It's not that way at all. This is the road less taken. I will be the first one up front to say that any stories that I tell in this podcast are not the official version, and the writers and creators who get to those stories will probably do a much better job. This is fun, though. And I encourage you to, if you would like to participate in this podcast, write your own stories. Feel free to send them to me. I'll read your stories on air. This is fun. Or I'll take the stories and I'll do my edits and take the bones of what you do and we'll put something out. Let's just enjoy this. This is a great chance as a creative community or creative bunch of people, and I don't care if you've never been creative before in your life. Now's that siren call. Be creative. Take a character. Write a short story on it. Learn how to write stories. I'm learning. I'm not a great storyteller. You'll hear that in this podcast, but it's still fun. Anyways, I babbled on. Let's get into this podcast. So the big Disney film, I believe it was a 2013 film, Frozen. Massive success. Huge, huge movie. It was critically very good. The movie stood on its own. It never felt like a money grab. It had a good plot. It had a terrific message. And it was also a story that raised some real troubling questions. And the biggest one that I saw that kind of came out, and I think a lot of people felt this way, had to deal with the king and queen in that story. Elsa and Anna were basically, Elsa was this little girl who had special magical abilities, and the message that her father gave, and no one, people gotta be pretty smug to be really hard on Elsa's parents, but Elsa's parents were like, hide. You gotta hide, which is a very common motif in films, is to say to the hero, you're special, you're terrific, but you gotta hide. You're seeing that a lot in the Man of Steel films that are going on right now, or have been going on, where basically the whole message, which is really, I think, hurts their movies down the road. The whole message to Superman, the Man of Steel films, is you're too special. If you let that out, the government, everyone's gonna work on you, and you need to hide. And it's a terrible beat, because it makes it very hard for the hero to have a journey outside that, and to heal, and to grow, and to flourish. Here, within the story, and for those of you who have not seen Frozen, and this is just a disclaimer, I can't wait till the day comes where we don't have to spoilers. Anytime I'm talking about a spoiler or a story, there's going to be spoilers. There has to be spoilers, or else I can't tell the story that I've been working on, that I want to tell. And a quick shout out, I want you to know that this story was worked on with my daughter, Addie Green. So very, very proud of her support, and hopefully I've been working on this, and hopefully it's something we'll be able to talk about. But I digress. So within this story, within Frozen, and in that story, in that universe, Elsa and Anna, basically Elsa has this incredible magical event happen, that she accidentally injures her sister. Her sister gets hit with the ice, and it's definitely going to be something that could kill her. And the parents, scared, go to these trolls. The trolls heal her somewhat, but Elsa, the parents can't control Elsa's powers. They get on a ship to go sail over. Elsa protests and saying, "Mom, Dad, please don't go." And keep in mind that by the time that they go to sea, the kingdom has already been restricted. They've closed it down. It's like no one's coming into the castle, and they're doing their business elsewhere. But boy, the internal family life of the castle is shut off to the public. Major part of the plot is Anna becoming free for a day to go out and to party with the citizens, while Elsa gets ready for her coronation. This story takes, as it seems like all Disney movies, it is sad sometimes, and it's a little fatiguing with Disney films, like, I grew up loving pro wrestling, and in pro wrestling you have this saying where basically, there's cheap ways for pro wrestlers to get heat when they're a bad guy. And it's called cheap heat. And the bad guy will come out and insult they'll say, hey, Portland, Oregon, you're a bunch of idiots. And the fans would, back in the day, go crazy, because they had a lot of civic pride, and they would insult the fans to work the fans up. And there's all, the whole pro wrestling world of telling those stories is rife with that type of behavior. Hey, we're going to tell a story. We need to get people over. So in order to get them over, we gotta do these tricks. Well, Disney has, and it's been discussed plenty of times, I'm sure, in many areas, they have the dead parent trick. Everybody's parents, every time the hero is usually young, and inevitably, in order for this bird to fly, they have to clip the wings, so to speak, or clip the parental figures, get them out of the story. And I don't know. I mean, in terms of Frozen, obviously the tale that they wanted to tell was of this sister or love relationship that was going on, this very pure and innocent love. But I think there's also a pretty profound story that could have been told about also dealing with the parents, dealing with mom and dad, and overcome it. Because keep in mind, Elsa's dad, whose name we will get into here in just a moment, was like, no, don't hide. And the mom was very passive. I mean, the mom, in terms of Disney characters, the mom, basically, it's really tough, because you never get a real beat other than she just kind of supports the father. And you buy it, because it's like, well, it's a medieval world, so the husband would have a lot of say. I don't particularly buy it. I don't buy some of that. But so the Elsa and Anna's parents is going to be the focus of our story. King Agnarr and Queen Iduna were the names, and you don't know these names. Now, some of you have watched Once Upon a Time, the ABC show, which was all about that had a lot to do with Anna and Elsa's parents. I'm using a little bit of that story when I get to the point where I tell my story, but a lot of that history I'm not going to keep for the story that I'm looking to tell. So if you haven't seen that show, please go check it out. Because they're doing basically the same thing I'm doing. They're just doing it with a lot more money and on ABC. They're telling stories out of school. But the story that I'm telling here is about something that also happened around the same time that Frozen came out. Is that, and I apologize profusely, I'm going to definitely try to have this in the show notes, was that some of the Tumblr, Reddit people, I believe a Reddit person, really did some homework and said, wait, whoa, 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 whoa. Elsa's parents and Anna's parents, maybe their ship could have been, when it went down, that could have been the ship in A Little Mermaid. And maybe, in addition to them being the ship in The Little Mermaid, maybe they survived. And maybe they ended up on an island and gave birth to Tarzan before being mauled by a jaguar. And maybe they were on their way to the Tangled wedding because in an Easter egg, the characters of Tangled were in Frozen. Why not? And that if you want to have some fun, look up on Google and do an actual search about those characters and what took place there in terms of people going back and forth, and people were going, well, no, this could never have been true because quite clearly Tangled took place 500 years. If you're looking at the dress and the outfits, and people got got pretty hot about whether this theory was, to the point, which I find absolutely hysterical, to the point that the writers and directors of Frozen were actually asked about this theory, which, I mean, if I'm them, I'm like going, guys, we're trying to do a movie here. You know how long it takes to put the animation together, to get the soundtrack together, to get the script right, to get the musical score, which is also soundtrack, to get the talent hired on. We weren't thinking of universe building, but that's what the Caverns of Story podcast is all about. Is we are going to here in just a moment, we're going to tell the story, or a version of this story. Couple quick reminders. This story is based on the Hans Christian Andersen poem, The Snow Queen. That's what Frozen's based off of. The trolls were in it, even down to the main characters getting hit in the heart with ice. But that story, they moved places around, they moved beats around, they did a lot of different things in order to tell their story. So as you can see, telling stories upon stories has a rich, profound history. So with that said, I think that I've done enough to bungle my way through this explanation. Let's go ahead and get to the story, and I will leave it to you, the kind cave dwellers with me. I will leave it to you fine cave dwellers out there to, and I mean that in the sense that we're both in the caverns together. We're all in the caverns together to look at these stories. I will leave it to you to love, hate, whatever, criticize the story. But I've titled this short story, King Agnarr and Queen Iduna, The Odyssey of Trust.